to show you how to set up your iConnectivity interface in a recording studio scenario. We're going to use a mioXL and we're going to connect it Ethernet to our computer. And then we're going to have some controllers on the USB host port and another device on the DIN port. This could be like a synth or some type of rack piece. They would all work, but we're going to show you some of the ideas of connecting it. We're going to do multiple connections through RTP to the computer, and we're also going to show you how you can set it up so it works standalone and with the computer at the same time. This is a very common request, and I'm actually going to do this with two presets so that we can have a separate standalone and a separate setup just for the recording in the computer. So this may be a little bit of a long video, but stick with me and we'll get it figured out. All right, so let's open Oracle for X Series right off the hop. And let's see if we can find our devices. So here's all our devices. Most of them are connected via RTP. The one we're going to focus on is this mioXL 008. You can see it's connected with RTP if I hit the little option here. Sometimes people find it hard to connect via RTP. Sometimes it doesn't show directly up. There's a few tricks to get that working, but we'll show you that in another video. So the first thing we need to do is we need to figure out, I'm going to do a factory reset on this real quick, just so we have a brand new mioXL setup. It might take another second for it to show up. So basically the first thing we're going to do is I have 3 controllers, USB controllers into the host port. So we're going to start by reserving those devices in. Let's start by going to the USB host reservation right here. And so now we want to reserve our controllers into these ports. So the first one here, this is a the one that says port 1. I know that's my launch pad. It's an older launch pad that I have. And then host 2, I'm going to put my nano control. And those are the only 2 I have. I don't have the other one powered up apparently. So we just have the 2 that we'll put in here for right now. And let's go back. And then I have a microcorg that I'm connecting to DIN 7, which is on the front. So let me go into my MIDI routing. Let's do some naming so I know where things are. So DIN 7 right here. I'm going to rename this as, I think I said microcorg, didn't I? This is a monologue. So I'm going to rename that right here. And so you can see the name once you edit it over here, shows up on this side over. You can edit that. And then we're also going to do that in a few other places, but for now we just need to do it on the DIN port here. And then we don't really need this because we're not connecting with the USB DAW port. We're going to connect over Ethernet. Then I'm going to go here into host 1 under the USB hosted device / instrument. And I'm going to name the first one Launchpad. And I'm going to name the second one Nano Control. Now my computer is not going to see any of these names. These are just for the purposes of setting up an Oracle for X Series. The names under USB hosted device / instrument do not show up in your DAWs or anywhere, and neither does the DIN. The only names that will show up from inside of Oracle X to your computers, if you connect USB DAW, these names will show up on the device port to computer. So just a heads up on that. So now that we have these few ports named, we can actually, so we got Launchpad, our Nano Control, and our Monologue in the places that we want them to be. We can actually go and start getting the devices connected to this computer. So what we want to do is we want to go back and we're going to go to the mioXL here again, and we're going to go to RTP/network. Now, if your device is properly connected to your computer, you're going to see a Bonjour name loaded over here. If you do not have it, if it's not online for some reason, it's not seeing connection on both sides, it won't show a Bonjour name at all. So that's something to think about. Just make a note of that to make sure that it's actually connecting. If not, you'll see a blank there. So what we're going to do is you probably wouldn't have gotten the device connected over Ethernet. You would have had to connect USB likely to even see the device in Oracle X if this wasn't going to show. So if we're on a Mac, we're going to want to go to our Spotlight search and go to Audio MIDI Setup, which I'm apparently going to have to pull over to this page. There we go. And so what we're going to want to do on here is we're going to want to hit our network option. So if you're on Big Sur, it's over here in this little tiny corner. If you're on some earlier versions, you might see one that's about the size of this IAC driver. And you can click on that. It has a little globe on it. But basically, it's the network setup page. So we're going to click on that. And if you're on Windows, then you're going to want to download RTP MIDI from our website, iConnectivity.com/downloads. Go under the Windows sections and you can find the RTP MIDI, and it looks exactly like this, except for you can change the colors and that kind of fun stuff on that version. All right, so now that we're in this page, the first thing we want to do, if there's not a session created already here, you want to hit this plus button and create a session, and then we're going to select that session, just click on it, and we want to change the Who May Connect to Me. This is super important because if this isn't changed, it'll connect the first time, but every time you try and get it to auto connect after, it will not connect. And it's very frustrating that it's not connecting. You're wondering why, and it just ends up being this little toggle right here. So you just need to switch this to anyone, and we should be good to go. So now we've created a session. What we're going to want to do is we want to create a session for every device that we're going to connect. So in our case, we have 3 devices. We have 2 on the host port and 1 on DIN. So we're going to do the first session right here. I'm going to go over and I'm going to give it a name. I like to start with my DIN ports first, personally, and I'm going to call this monologue. So the local name is what's going to show up in your DAW. So if whatever you want, you can make this as long as you want or whatever you want to do. But this local name is what you're going to see in your DAW. The bonjour name is what we're going to use to connect to the mioXL, which won't be seen anywhere except for inside of Oracle X and in here. So in the future, you won't actually see that name. You'll just see the local name. But I like to try and call it the same thing if possible. But sometimes you may have to shorten it if it's a longer name. Note that the bonjour name should be under 15 characters or under. Shouldn't start with a number. And I try and keep as many special characters away as possible. But things like dashes will be fine. So I'm going to copy this bonjour name. And then I'm going to click Enable. And you can see it's gotten an address. So we're going to go over here and we're going to take the one that corresponds to this. So all these RTP ports, I'm on the mioXL, so there's 22 RTP ports. The first 12 RTP ports are routed by default to the 12 DIN ports. So RTP1 equals DIN1, RTP2 equals DIN2, RTP3 equals DIN3. And then if we scroll down here, RTP13 starts on the host ports. So RTP13 is host 1, RTP14 is host 2, and then it goes all the way up to RTP22, which is host 10. So you can connect every single device through this option, which is great. So what I would like to do is I like to match them up so it actually makes sense, so I don't have to go change the routing. It's just a lot easier if I match up what port I'm connected to, and it's already set up routing on that RTP port. So in my example, I have DIN7 I'm connecting in and out of, so I'm going to go to RTP7 right here. We're going to click on this little responder drop-down menu, and we're going to switch it to initiator. And so the purpose of this is that the mioXL is going to initiate the connection with the computer. So every time you start with your computer, the mioXL is going to be like, hey, let's connect right away. And so they're going to do that connection automatically for you. If you're in responder mode, you're always going to have to go into that network page or the RTP MIDI app and connect these ports manually. And it's just unnecessary work that you don't need to do. So why not do it this way? There's 2 ways to connect. There's IP, where you can actually type in the IP and the port number. So if you're over here, you can type in your IP and then you can type in the port number for that. So you can do it that way, or the way I like to do it is by name, which is the bonjour name, which we talked about earlier. So we've copied this bonjour name and we're going to go into here And we're just going to paste our name, our Bollinger name, and we're going to click save. So once you hit save, this should show up right here. You should see the IP port, and then you'll see the name right here next to it. Sometimes you may have trouble connecting this originally if you don't click outside of this Bollinger name option. I just did this a second ago. That's why there's a cut in the video. I forgot to click outside of the Bollinger name, and it defaulted back to nothing, which was the original. So like if I create another session, we won't see it now, but the original session had nothing in the Bollinger name. And because I didn't, after I finished adding this, I didn't click out of here, it didn't take the Bollinger name inside a network setup, and that's why it didn't connect. So if you don't see that connecting, you might want to look at adding the Bollinger name again, and then clicking outside of the Bollinger name box, just anywhere over here. I usually click by the name because it's not clickable, and that will get me outside of that box to make sure it stays in there. So just be very careful that this Bollinger name stays in there correctly. That's usually more of an Apple thing, more so than on the Windows side. The Windows side tends to stay there a lot nicer. Now on the Windows side, you'll notice that you have to have the session checked as disabled, or just not the enable button checked, to edit names. And then after you're finished doing the naming, then you click the enable button. So that's the only little difference between those pages. So now that that's connected, we have RTP7 from our monologue going into, or DIN 7, I guess, going to RTP7, which is going to our computer on this session that we just created. So what does that actually look like? So if I go into, let me jump into Ableton, just to give you some idea. I mean, this works for any software really. Just take a second here. We're gonna open up this. Ableton wants an audio option. I'm just gonna pick the basic one. So if we go into here, now we're gonna see, if I look at my my MIDI port, so I go to link tempo MIDI, I can see that there's an input right here called network monologue. And so that's the connection right now. So this is gonna be, I've named it monologue, and it gives it the exact name that was the local name. Remember, we talked about the local name showing up in your DAW. So this is the name right here. And so that local name right here as the input or output inside your software, and then that connects the session or the computer over to RTP7 on the mioXL, and RTP7 on the mioXL is sent to, if I go to MIDI routing, I can see that RTP7, if I scroll to the bottom here, click on RTP7, it's going to go to the monologue, which is DIN 7. So hopefully that helps you follow the idea of how it connects. And then if you look at DIN 7, the monologue here, I didn't show you this originally, but it actually goes to RTP7. So it's actually coming in through the exact same, so the in and out on that exact same network session is already set up. So once you set up the network session, if you set up the RTP port here with the session, then you'll have an in and out set up. And if you set it up with the default routings, you won't have to worry about doing any extra routing, which is kind of nice. So now we're going to do two more. So let me make that happen. Let's go. I don't know where audio MIDI went. So we're going to create two more sessions. And so one is going to be for the Launchpad. And note, I'm going to click out of it this time. Not going to make that mistake. And then the next one's going to be for the Nano Control. And I'm actually going to make this a little different. I'm going to call this Korg Nano Control on the local name, and I'm just going to call it Nano Control as the Bollinger name, so that you can see the local name go into your DAW and the Bollinger name connect inside of Oracle X. So let's do the Launchpad first. So I'll enable this. Let's do Launchpad first. So I'm going to grab the Bonjour name, copy, and the host ports start at RTP 13. So I have my Launchpad into host 1. So that's going to be 13. So let's switch it to initiator from responder. We're going to paste in this Launchpad name and click save. And you can see it's made a connection to that port on the Launchpad. We're going to do the same thing for the next one. We're going to go to the Korg Nano Control. And remember that we named them a little different this time. So Nano Control, I copied the Bonjour name. Make sure it's the Bonjour name to go into Oracle. Switch RTP 14, which is host 2, to initiator. And we're going to paste in that name and click save. And it's made that connection. So now you can see, if you want to double check, you can click on each one of these. So I click on Monologue and you can see it's connected to number 7. Click on Launchpad, it's connected to 13. And Nano Control is connected to 14. And now if we go into our DAW, I can see that there's a Launchpad. And you'll notice that the network session for the Nano Control says Korg Nano Control. Because remember, I just called it Nano Control in the Bonjour name, but I call it Korg Nano Control in the local name. So you can see that this is the local name in your DAW right here. So your computer's always going to see that. And so that's all we really need to do to actually set this up. And so I wanted to talk about doing 2 presets. So let's do our first preset where our Launchpad goes to the monologue. I don't know why anyone would want to send a Launchpad to a monologue, because that probably wouldn't be the greatest setup. But this is an example of how just a standard USB controller, say it was a keyboard, could connect to a synth like a monologue. So let's go into our MIDI routing, and we're going to go to our host port. So let's scroll to the USB hosted device / instrument in the left column. We're going to select our Launchpad. And if we want this to go to our monologue, it's simple enough. We just have to go to monologue right there. And so that'll send directly from the Launchpad to the monologue. And we don't even actually need RTP 13 routing here if we were just going without the computer. We could just go directly from the Launchpad to the monologue and it would work. So that's all we do for that. So if we wanted to save that as a setup, or say we even want it to send it to multiple devices, because often you'll have like a master keyboard here and then you'll send to multiple. So say we sent it to all of these guys, maybe even sent it to a few host ports just for fun. And so we're going to save this as a preset. So what we want to do is we want to go back to the main page, click presets. We're going to do save as, and I'm going to save the first one as, I'm going to call it Standalone. So that I know that I can use my main controller with my other gear without having to use the computer itself. All right, so that's saved. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go where it says load preset. I'm going to go preset 2. And we're going to save. So we're going to create our second setup on this one, which we don't have to do anything on the second preset because everything's already set up. So your monologue's going into RTP 7. So everything's going directly into the computer and coming back out as I want it for my second setup. So there's no problem there. I'm going to actually go presets, and I'm just going to save this so I can give it a name. And this says DAW setup. And we're going to click save. And so now I can go between these two. So if I look at DAW setup and I go to MIDI routing and click on the monologue, you can see, or sorry, if I click on the Launchpad, you can see I just have the USB DAW port and the RTP connection. So it's just going in and out to the computer. If I go to presets and I click on load and I do the standalone setup, yes, to load that, and I go back to MIDI routing, I can go down. We're going to click on the Launchpad, and now you can see it's going to everything that you would want to go to. You can leave the connections as well to the USB DAW and RTP if you wish to do so. That should be totally fine. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to go back and just kind of show you in Ableton how that setup could work. So what I'll do is, a lot of times if you just want it to go in through your computer, you can set up maybe we don't need the monologue, maybe in. We can leave the in on that. So I'm going to set up our 3 devices as input, but I don't need to send back out to the Nano Control because that doesn't really have anything that I want to control. I'll send back out to the Launchpad, because we're going to set that up to get light feedback from Ableton. And I'm going to set up the monologue with track. So let me set up my launchpad here. So I got my control surface, which is the launchpad. I'm going to select the network session launchpad for in and out. And you've noticed in the background, if you're an Ableton person, you'll notice that this little red square means that it's properly set up. So the launchpad's actually receiving feedback from this Ableton session onto the lighting of that launchpad, which is really cool. And so if we have a MIDI setup, we can do it from a specific in. So we can take our launchpad and we can send it out to our MIDI output to our monologue. And we can send out MIDI as we need, or we can record, for in this arrangement view, we could set up, a quick clip here. Let me insert this MIDI clip. And so we can set up some random notes in here, and we can actually play that out to our chord monologue. And I can hear my monologue playing through a set of headphones back there, but you probably can't hear it, but it's playing out to my monologue now. So this kind of gives you an idea of how you might want to set things up. If you have any questions, though, about the setup, feel free to contact us. But this is a great way to get your recording studio set up over Ethernet. It shows you how to create multiple sessions for each device and get everything set up and ready for recording. And hopefully this is very helpful to some people. If not, feel free to contact us at iConnectivity.com/support.